Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Reader's Journey. I'm your host, Alex from Alex and Books, and today we have Todd Herman, author of The Alter Ego Effect. Todd, thank you so much for joining us today.
It is a pleasure, my man. Good to finally see the man behind the big Instagram account.
So, Todd, before we dive into your book, I really like to talk about your background because you describe yourself as a mental game strategist, and you've worked with Olympic athletes, business executives, and many top performers. And can you tell us what you do exactly and how did you get there? Because I have to say it's a pretty cool job, and it's not something you major in college for.
Yeah, it starts good conversations on airplanes when people ask you what you do. So background, I played college football, had some scholarships. I was a nationally ranked badminton player, so I was a pretty good athlete, and I am not a physically gifted individual. I'm not 6'4" and 240 pounds of solid muscle when I was in high school or anything like that. But I was someone who had a really strong kind of mental game that I had developed for myself, because that was what I needed to lean on to make sure I got all my capabilities out onto the field. And when I got done playing, I was volunteering at a high school, like many of us do. We get out and we get into coaching. And I started spending way more time talking to the kids about their preparation, their routines, the goals they needed to set for themselves, breathing exercises, relaxation, concentration stuff that I had done to develop myself. And what I had sort of developed for myself was this systematic process of continuously getting into the zone in the flow state for myself. And pretty much every single game that I played in, especially for football, I was always operating in that flow state. And everyone thinks of it as some mythical place, but it's really not. If you just do a few things in a certain order, then you fundamentally get to this place of really trusting your skills. Trust is a really big thing that you work with people on when it comes to peak performance. Then the chances of the flow and the zone state start showing up just increases dramatically. So then parents started asking me if I could mentor their sons and daughters on basically the inner game and the mental and the emotional side of the sport to get them playing to their peak level. And I was like, yeah, sure. And now I didn't think of it as a business or anything like that. And it evolved into it. People started saying, well, how much would you charge? And I said, well, how about $75 for 3 sessions? And that's exactly what my fee was for 3 years, from 1997 when I started, when I was 21, until 2000. That's how much I was charging. So it wasn't very much, but I loved what I was doing because I was working with athletes. I was working in sport, I loved the topic category and I was really good at kind of teaching people more about how they can kind of master that self side of things. And it sort of grew and snowballed from there, because one of the biggest ways that I grew my business was through speaking. And speaking is, out of all the platforms that you could use, speaking is probably the most powerful of them all. Still to this day, whether it's YouTube videos or whatever, speaking just as a skill that you can develop transfers across so many domains. And that's where it started. And then eventually I kind of got myself working into Olympic athletes and pro athletes. And I'm a big believer in mentorship and apprenticeship. So my parents gave me great advice after I was leaving our farm and ranch in Western Canada where I grew up. And they knew that whatever profession I chose wasn't going to be the same as what I had grown up inside of. And they said, whatever you go and do, just go find the best and learn from them. Never settle for anything but the best. So I did. The only book that made sense to me from a sports psych standpoint was this book called Coaching the Mental Game, from the legend Harvey Dorfman. Literally kind of wrote the Bible of the industry. And I reached out to him, and after some prodding on my end, finally got to go and work with him underneath his wing. But you asked the question about what is the mental game? Well, when you watch the interviews after games or press conferences with coaches and players, pretty much every single response to a question is never that I didn't spend enough time on my skills at that level. It's always, we had a breakdown in our focus. We had just a concentration lap. The guys weren't playing confident today. All that stuff is inner game stuff. And back when I started in 97, people didn't train this stuff. It's actually a really bad business idea to get involved in getting in a business where people, there isn't a demand necessarily right away for it. I was literally kind of like an audience of one. There wasn't many of us that were out there. There's people who call themselves sports psychologists, but really what they were is they were psychologists who, if someone called them and said, hey, I'm an athlete, they would work with them, but they didn't actively market themselves away. I actively marketed myself as a peak performance and mental game guy. And so you're working with them on anxiety and stress management. You're working with them on their concentration abilities. You're working with them on their goal and preparation skills. You're working with them on their imagery abilities. People call it visualization. The biggest mistake that people make in the world of personal development, self-help is they just sort of have it as a passing comment or throwaway comment. If you just got to visualize it, you got to see it happening for yourself. Well, visualization is a skill. It's a capability. You've got to develop it. Just because you use it every day doesn't mean that you can use it self-directed towards the things that you want to have happen. Most people do a terrible job of actually visualizing. And when I say visualizing, that's why I use the word imagery. Imagery, you're using all of your senses, what you see, taste, touch, feel, smell, like all these things, engaging everything. It activates the brain in a different way. And then we're also working with them on relaxation ability, and then also their performance identity, which is really where the book, The Alter Ego Effect, came out of. And that's what I'm sort of known for in pro sports, Olympic sports, is I'm the guy that can help people really fast. Most people don't want that weight, whereas I do. I am an athlete. We want to solve things very fast. The problem with most of the sports psych world or the personal development self-help world is they make everyone think that it's a belief issue. The moment something becomes a belief issue for people, then there's the heavy weight of, oh my God, this is going to take a long time for me to fix this, right? Whereas when I change someone's identity, which means the way that they relate with themselves, using the concept of an alter ego, we can shift and change people really, really fast. So I liked having the moniker of being the quick hit guy that you could bring in and, in a very short amount of time, I can shift someone's performance.
Awesome. And yeah, you mentioned the alter ego, and I really like to dive into what that is, because when I was reading your book, it helped articulate all these ideas I've heard before, like the famous Kobe Bryant has Black Mamba. So how do you define the alter ego?
Well, the alter ego was a term that was first coined in 44 BC by this great Roman statesman and philosopher Cicero, and it means the other I or trusted friend within. And we all know the power of having a great network around us, having great friends, great peers, great mentors, great coaches, whatever the case is, because a lot of success in life is access. Who can open up a door for you? And relationships are so important. But most people don't think about how important that is between the 6 inches of their own ears. They've forgotten the real gift that they had when they were in their youth, or really in their childhood years. And that was that we play with the idea of someone and something else all the time when we're kids. It's our creative imagination at work. And the creative imagination is truly one of the superpowers that human beings have. We're not oak trees. We're not going to be an oak tree forever. An acorn will always grow into an oak tree. Human beings aren't like that. We can shift and change rapidly. We also already shift and change based on the roles that we're playing in life, right? Like who I am when I'm around my kids and how I show up is, of course, going to be different in that context than when I'm in my business. And even in the context of my business, I play the role of coach. I play the role of, content creator and program creator that ends up getting licensed out around the world. I play the role of the speaker who goes out there as well. I'm the leader of my team as well. And all those demand different skills, different attributes, different qualities to be successful at them. And most people get trapped by always showing up as the same version of themselves. And that's really walking away from the gift that we have, is you get to choose very intentionally how you want to show up on all these different fields. And the alter ego was an idea that I had kind of uncovered after working with more and more elite athletes, for how they were showing up really consistently at really peak levels. They would leave their sort of everyday person on the sidelines, and they had this, real identity that they stepped into onto the field. Kobe Bryant used it. Even Beyonce had Sasha Fierce, and it translates across so many different industries and fields. I just happened to be the one, because I was doing a lot of one-on-one work. There's a lot of people who write books, but they're researchers. The problem with research is you can't see the real nuance of what people are actually doing until you work one-on-one with individuals. And because, most of my work was always one-on-one, and I'm tracking a lot of data for the clients from so many different sports, this recurring theme kept on popping up amongst the best of the best, and they would use the idea of an alter ego, performance identity, secret identity, just different words that they would say, persona, as the way that they would get the best out of themselves. So it's a universal idea. Every person that's watching this or listening to this has already used it, and it's a powerful way to disassociate from whatever worries, concerns, beliefs that you might have about yourself, and step into another version of yourself, unshackle yourself from that stuff, so that you can truly allow all your capabilities to creatively come out of you. And when you do this right, you end up finding that amazing Zen-like flow state where you're not consciously judging your performance. And this isn't just athletes. This is creators nowadays. This is business people nowadays. This is even parents. Anytime you're put into a situation where you need to adapt quickly, you need to develop into a new role for yourself, this is a really playful and fun way to level up far more quickly than trying to just do it out of like grit.
Totally, yeah. And when I was reading your book, I was surprised at like how common this is. Like you mentioned, Bo Jackson. Like he says he never played a day of football in his life. It was Jason from Friday the 13th. And like for myself, I created this character called Alex in Books, who, because like I know myself as someone, I'm 6'5", I love playing sports my whole life, and I had like this identity problem of shifting from this guy that always played sports and video games to this guy that loves reading books. So I created like Alex in Books. And now, like, I feel like it's kind of two different characters, but I'm starting to shift more to like my identity towards Alex in Books. So can you kind of explain like the difference between faking it till you make it and creating an alter ego?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and here's the thing, you do have two different identities. Like that's actually a very healthy way of living and being. Like I've got dad mode, and I have some people have this friction issue that is like, oh, am I being fake? If it's like, listen, like stop being so concerned about whether or not you're being fake. Like as long as your intentions are that you are trying to, you're being very intentional for how you want to show up, because that's the way that you want to show up. If you want to show up because you want to impress other people or trick other people, yeah, that's being fake. That's being disingenuous. And truthfully, that's actually how most people's identities are nowadays. And they don't mean to be that way, but that's the way that they're showing up, and that's why they don't like what they're getting as a result. It's because they are doing things to play politics, or they are doing things to curry favor with friends or peers, or they are doing things because they think that that's what their mom or their dad want them to be, and yet it makes them feel trapped on the inside, because the real them, or what they really want to have happening, or really how they want to be showing up, isn't getting out there. And so going back to what's the difference between faking it till you make it and the alter ego effect? Faking it till you make it, just that in and of itself as an idea is just a bad idea, because words matter amongst human beings. Just no one wants to be fake. And people have used the term faking it till you make it to actually describe what is actually sort of nested in as an idea amongst the alter ego method, but they just didn't have the right words for it. Now I'm the actual expert on I'm the kind of global defined expert on the world of, alter egos and identity. It's what I have. No one has more hours of working with people on this than I do. 17,000 plus hours working with people one-on-one, not counting the tens of thousands of hours doing group trainings and workshops and speeches from all around the world. And so the fake it till you make it is typically coming from a place of you're trying to do it because you're trying to impress other people in some way for how you can truly start showing up in a more relaxed manner too, like more playful. There's so many amazing psychological principles that are nested inside the idea. That's why inside the book, I unpack all the different scientific studies that have been done around the different elements that make up the alter ego process, and why it's a super healthy way to operate.
Yeah, and in the book you call it like field of play, and it makes so much sense when you realize this. It's like the way you act in your work field is different than the way you act in your family field or your friends field. So it's a completely natural thing, because I used to think alter ego had like this negative association to it, But after you're reading your book, it's like a positive thing. You want to like identify your alter ego, and you want to know how to use it, because then you could capitalize it and take your performance to the next level.
Yeah, and you know what? Like I've had what's funny about the book. Anytime you write a book and it's been a bestseller, like the Alter Ego Effect has, it it's amazing how many different types of people come to you. And one sort of market where the book has gone viral is in the hip hop world. And I probably have about 50% coverage of the entire hip hop community. And if you saw my Instagram DMs, it's a pretty funny place sometimes. But the number of like super big name hip hop artists, you know, in the world of entertainment, using a stage name is very popular, right? And that's, again, it follows the exact, what I talk about in the book, the exact process for why they're doing it is exactly how they went and built their alter ego for. But I had so many you know, entertainers in the last year and a bit since the book has been out just say, you know what, like I had thought that I'd made a mistake, and that I was somehow being disingenuous because this alter ego that I had built sort of took over my entire life. And now you've given me a language, or really like a technology that I can be using. And I see that, no, I actually made the right move. And it was, you know, me tapping into some of the very core genius that human beings have. It's just that I didn't also do it in other areas of my life. You know, I didn't say, hey, this alter ego is built specifically for me to win on this field. And I carried it across into too many other fields and tried to make it do too much for myself. And so they're like, now they're playing around with it a lot more. And, you know, I had one guy, super big name, that was like, I feel like I've done therapy for 15 years, and this book solved all of that in one sitting. So thanks for that. So that was, you know, it's nice messages to get.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make. You want to develop this alter ego and kind of keep it in one area. Like I just finished Kobe Bryant's book, The Mamba Mentality, and I've watched interviews with him, and he used to listen to the Friday the 13th theme song because he wanted to become like a killer on the court. But as soon as he got off the court, he's like this loving family man, and it's like you want to know where that alter ego ends so it doesn't like overflow into a certain area.
Yeah, and actually, I was on Kobe because we connected over the concept and stuff, and I was actually out in California on the to meet with Kobe on the Tuesday of the week that he actually got into the helicopter crash, because we were meeting to talk about bringing the alter ego training into his Mamba Academy, and we connected because when I was chatting with him about his book, I said I told him it's a terrible book. And he's so used to being excellent, and he's not used to people who call him out on. And I'm like, dude, you whoever you wrote it with, you guys created a picture book, and it didn't unpack your actual mentality. The promise of the book wasn't there. Like there's so much more meat on the bone that you've got left to give. So we were actually going to be chatting about also writing the book, the actual book of the Mamba Mentality, to get it out, because the guy's outlook on things, his principles, his philosophies on stuff was very different than a lot of other people, you know, typically operate. And that's probably why he resonated so much with so many people out there. But you know, genius guy with the way that he truly did use this concept in its pure form of how to go out and, as an example, use it.
Wow, that's incredible. I wish that book yeah, I wish he was still around and that book would have happened. Yeah. Was kind of a hard transition, but in the book you mentioned how there's certain forces that try to like prevent or stop your alter ego, and you mentioned imposter syndrome, personal trauma, and narratives. Can you kind of unpack each of those and how they try to prevent us?
Yeah. So you know, the way that I wrote the book was, so one of my heroes personally is Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Power of Myth, and he's the one who gifted the world with the idea of the hero's journey, and inspired truly the entire Star Wars saga through George Lucas. When he discovered the hero's journey, he truly did build out those movies in that form, and so the way that I wrote the book was, it's very useful for people to understand that inside of our minds, we all go on this hero's journey. And anytime you have a hero, there's obviously a villain. And so most people get into a conversation in their own head, and it's just them talking to themselves. And I call it the merry-go-round effect. You don't get off. You just keep on going and going, and it can be a self-defeating cycle of you just sort of spiraling down. And so to create these kind of polar views of ordinary world and extraordinary world, and in the ordinary world, the forces that end up trapping us are, and three of the hidden forces. There's many forces, but the three hidden forces are imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is this idea that, we have discounted a lot of our wins and successes in life to just luck, happenstance. Well, of course, it was just right place, right time. And so we dismiss away a lot of our successes. But we look at someone else's successes and we go, oh, aren't they so smart? Aren't they so brilliant? Didn't they make such a strategic and decisive move over there? But when we look at ourselves this way, that's a classic case of imposter syndrome. The second side to imposter syndrome is that you have this fear that people are going to finally find you out, that you're not as good as they perceive you to be. And that's been a shared experience amongst a lot of people throughout history. People who are tremendously successful, have a lot of wins in life. They still have this sort of anxiety that they might be uncovered. That's imposter syndrome, truly. That's a hidden force that drives many people's behaviors. How do you combat that? Well, one of the ways is to actually capture your wins. What are all your wins that you have? If you don't have a routine of capturing your wins, then it's very easy for us to just only recall the losses that we have, because they sometimes sting us more. The second thing around personal traumas, I mean, I've been through some really hard stuff in my life that happened to me when I was especially younger, and that very much ruled the shame and the guilt that came out of that as a young kid, ruled a lot of my behavior, ruled a lot of my anxieties and fears that I had around, the skeletons in the closet that people were going to maybe discover, or ruled a lot of my behavior. And so it drove me in a lot of different ways. And then the third one is tribal narratives. And tribal narratives are, every single person is sort of attaches themselves to groups that are sort of larger than them. Could be, hey, I'm a police officer. And then what you do is, because you're a police officer, you take on the identity of what it means to be a police officer. And you might see how other police officers operate. And then that stuff becomes an unconscious sort of ruling puppet string of how you operate in life. Or it could be what it means to be a Catholic, or a Jew, or a Black person, or an immigrant, or someone from New York City and someone from Denmark, or I'm a Canadian. And so there's these sort of narratives of me out there about what a Canadian is. Oh, so they're nice and they're all this kind of, although my friends would say I've been living in New York City for far too long and Todd's not much of a Canadian anymore, or he doesn't act in the same way as a lot of Canadians. But so those things can be really powerful, but in many ways they can also trap a lot of people, because they say, oh, well, I'm from the projects and no one from the projects makes it, right? Or I'm a farm kid, which is my story. And so no one from Podunk, middle of nowhere, gets to go and do that. Or, it can be, like I said, it can be exact opposite, because the great thing about being a farm kid is most people have a narrative. When I introduce myself as a farm kid, because this has happened many, many, many times in my life, they automatically sort of attach to you that you're hardworking, that you're trustworthy, because people think of like farm values and stuff, right? But tribal narratives, when you don't recognize them, can end up ruling a big part of your life. Or my family has never been an entrepreneur, and so then all of a sudden you don't pursue anything that's entrepreneurial, despite the fact that that's what you want to go do. Or I'm someone with a 3 or a 2.2 GPA. Or I was always in the remedial classes in high school. And now what does it mean to be a remedial type student? Well, it could rule you. It means that you could take on and adopt the idea that you're stupid, that you can't get it, that you're not smart, or whatever. So tribal narratives really do. And I mean, I know this just from the personal work I've done with so many people, that in the onboarding process of working with them, I really do unpack a lot of these things to make sure that they're choosing how they truly want to be leading their lives, and that it hasn't been chosen for them. And when I say chosen for them in that they have given up their sort of ability to lead their lives because they've attached themselves to ideas that aren't very supportive.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point to make. Like the narrative you tell yourself, like like who you were isn't who you have to be for the rest of your life. And that, the narrative you tell yourself is really important. Like I went to business school, but now I have a like completely different job, and I spend most of my time reading and writing. And it's like I had to change that narrative in my head to say like I can do this, I can become this.
Yeah, and and so to kind of take that a step forward with people is that the faster that you can get at shifting and changing and telling a new story about yourself, about what you're capable of doing, about what the next chapter is going to be, or because people use the things that happened in their past as excuses for what's going to be happening in the future, the moment you can actually really compartmentalize your life and saying like that was the chapter of my 20-year, like of my 20th year on the planet, and instead of saying that's going to be the chapter of my 21st year, or if like, that was the chapter of my previous 36 years, and it was a retelling constantly, like it was the never-ending story inside of it. But like you have the opportunity at any time to make the decision that I'm going to close that chapter now. It doesn't serve me anymore, maybe, and I'm going to move on in another direction. And it's not that I'm dishonoring who that person was. I'm going to honor the skills, the abilities, the appreciation, the philosophies that it's given me to now go and lead a completely different life. And that's why, when I first started developing the actual method that I talk about in the book, so I started working with all these different athletes, and I had used the idea when I was playing football, and then when I started in business, because I was so insecure about how young I looked, and I'd used this concept to help myself really accelerate onto the path of success. And then when I started getting into working with more top quality athletes, and this theme started bubbling up, and I started taking notes. I'm like, wait, well, this is really interesting, and you're doing it that way and you're doing it this way, and if we combine, this is kind of the recipe for how we're all doing it. And I started getting it out in front of more and more people and becoming widely known for the guy who does this. It was such a powerful model to help people get past these hidden forces a lot faster, because most of the time you're told that you need to go through therapy. Now, I'm not saying you don't go through therapy. That can be a very powerful thing, but at the same time, most people can't wait until they're perfect until they go and they pursue their thing. They still have to be going and working. They still have to be going and showing up onto the field and playing the game, or they still have to be being a great parent. And the alter ego was this great sort of anchoring device that they could use to still bring themselves up to a better level of performance, while then retreating back into and maybe resolving some of the painful stuff from the past, possibly if that was something that was a need for people.
Yeah, totally. I remember this great quote. It's like, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And I always come back to that. It's such a good idea. And so now that we talked about what the alter ego effect is, I like to get into like a process of creating one. For instance, like a lot of my listeners, they're aspiring writers, and they're people that want to become writers, want to write their book, but they have something like preventing them, stopping them. So what would be like the process that you would advise them?
Yeah. So, I mean, first is, you already started with it, is identify the field of play, the role that you most want to go and develop with this, because it always lives in context, because we already live in context in our own worlds, based on the people that we're around, the circumstance we're put into. So how I show up when I'm a dad to my kids is different than who I show up with when I'm in my business, or when I'm going to go compete in sports and whatnot. So the role is the first place. Like, where do you want, to really sort of hone and develop this better model for how you want to show up. And then secondly is, okay, well, answering the simple questions of like, well, what is it that you don't like about how you're currently showing up right now? Or maybe that you're completely avoiding even showing up, and you're not even writing in this instance. And so what are those things? And then you just flip that. Then, okay, well, how do you want to be showing up out there? And this is actually when the kind of creation starts to happen. How would you most want to be showing up? Or another way of asking is, who or what is something that you're inspired by that might be already doing what you're doing? Or who or what are you inspired by in the way that they show up in their world, that you like to borrow those qualities and bring them into this role that you have over here. So Kobe is a good example of that then. So Kobe was watching Kill Bill. That's actually where he got the inspiration. He was going through a really, really hard time at the time because he was, was going through this sexual assault trial. And he felt like he was losing his edge, is what he called it. And in conversations I had with him since, he felt like he was losing his identity, just to help clarify the kind of language there. And so he was watching Kill Bill, and he saw the Black Mamba snake come on in the one scene, and it just flicked. He's like, that's what I'm going to take out onto the court, because a Black Mamba doesn't care what's happening in the world around it. It doesn't have a bunch of emotion or anything. It was because he felt like he was losing his edge. He felt like he was going to be losing his identity on the court then too. He wasn't going to be able to perform to the level that he knew he could. So he kept the Black Mamba in a cage in his own mind, and then he walked up to that cage as an imagery tool before a game, and he would unlock it, and then that's when he would sort of embody the idea of a Black Mamba. So it wasn't that he was inspired by Wilt Chamberlain and he wanted to play like Wilt Chamberlain. He was inspired to act in a certain way, like just strike, be lethal, be unrelenting, and it's those adjectives and verbs that sort of drove, who the inspiration was for his alter ego. So again, you might already have an idea. So mine was, do you know Charles Bukowski?
Yeah, famous writer.
Yeah, right. Okay, good, because I was going to be all over you as Alex in books if you didn't know who Bukowski was. So I love as a fiction writer, Bukowski is just, he's also kind of like that quintessential, writer, smokes, drinks, swears heavily. And so when I was writing my book, I would turn my hat around. I actually had a hat that I wore when I was writing the alter ego, because I'm dyslexic, right? And I had used that in some ways as a bit of a, personal trauma or whatever. I actually use dyslexia has always been a superpower for me because it allows me to think in a different way. But when it came to writing, I kind of used it as a bit of a crutch for myself. But I turned my hat around and I would take on the kind of moniker or behavior of Bukowski, and in some ways Joseph Campbell as well, because I like the way he articulated himself. But Bukowski, in that I'm just going to absolutely just tear this typewriter up, because that was his attitude. All the stories are right there in my fingertips, and I'm just going to sit down and because he talked about how he didn't really have a lot of issues around writer's block. And so Bukowski was my alter ego model that I used in my head. So I actually was using the form of someone who was already very good at the category that I was working in, the role I was working in. Kobe, he took the inspiration of how he wanted to show up. So there's kind of different, right? There's different ways of doing this. That's what I love about this, is you're only limited to your imagination. I'm just giving you very much a paint by numbers approach to how you can develop this. And then this fourth step now is we need to name it, and we have to come up with a totem and an artifact for it. Okay. So you did it already, Alex in Books. It's a really great name that you gave yourself. It just also happened to become your Instagram handle as well. And so what's the name that you're going to use for it? Because human beings, the moment you give something a name, it's like you've just birthed it into creation, because that's what makes authors such a fascinating group, because you're literally birthing something into creation. A book, could be an article, whatever. It didn't exist before, and now you're birthing it with words. And words are the way that human beings create reality. That's why words are so important. A lot of people have over-governed self-talk. What I mean by that is there's way too much self-help stuff that's out there concerned with what you're saying to yourself. I'm a lot more concerned about what you're actually saying as words. So for example, when I've gone in to do trainings and consultings and advising for major sports teams, we have people who record and track the conversations that even athletes are having with each other. Because in those even microcosms of conversations, it tells you a lot about what the culture is like. Or when you describe to me your situation, the choices of words that you use tell me a lot about how you see the world. Self-talk, that's the job of the mind, is to just produce activity. Now, the quality of the activity, meaning your self-help, might be more, it could be better quality or less quality depending on the person. And yes, it'd be great, but it's really hard to govern that. It's really hard for me I can't get inside your head, Alex, and track all your self-talk, but I can see and track the words that you're using. So that's why giving my alter ego a name is so important. So like when I played football, Geronimo was my alter ego. And then when I got into business and I was very much insecure, lacked confidence, and felt like I lacked maybe being articulate. And what it was doing is it was stopping me from getting out there and promoting and selling and marketing my business. Now I was already a good coach because I cared. I loved working with people. And but the hard thing about business is you got to play many roles. So you just can't hide and say, oh well, the one with the best product always wins. That's not how it goes in business. You still got to get out there and market and sell yourself. And I was resisting against it. I wasn't doing the things I needed to do to market and sell myself. And so I built Super Richard. And Super Richard became the advocate for Todd's stuff. Super Richard was a blend of Joseph Campbell, Superman, and Benjamin Franklin. Three of my heroes. And I wasn't using Superman in the cliche sense. I grew up watching the Superman version, of the 70s and 80s, loved it. And that Super Richard version of myself who wore glasses, I called it my reverse Superman. Superman put on glasses to become the mild-mannered Clark Kent. I put on the glasses to become my super version of my marketing and sales self, the guy who loved to promote Todd, which actually honors one of the great rules in Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules book, fellow Canadian. He actually grew up not too far from where I grew up on a farm as well. But, rule number 2 is treat yourself as if you're someone worthy of being taken care of, sort of, to ad-lib it a little bit. And so that's how Super Richard approached Todd. He was not afraid of making phone calls, was not afraid of getting a no. That's just bull through a china shop. He was going to keep on barreling through. And so giving something a name is really powerful. And then finding a uniform for it, finding a token or an artifact. I used my hat, when I was writing. I use glasses still to this day as a very intentional way for how I want to show up. I actually just like to wear them for dress anyway. But having a uniform is so powerful. And like I said, it could be a ring, it could be a necklace, it could be a pair of socks, it could be, I've got clients who have a pebble that they use in one of their pockets that was taken from a very special place for them. So again, your imagination is the only limiter. And then the final step in this is now activate it. Now you got to get out there and you got to make it happen. Acting with intention, truly breathing life into this alter ego. And what I talk about in the book, honoring it. So that's why wherever you're choosing your source of inspiration, you want to have a very deep connection to it or a strong connection to it. All right. You can't pull an alter ego off of the shelf. I would love that because I would have a shopping store on my website that just had alter egos on it. And you could buy it for $29.99 plus shipping and handling, and then you could get at it. But it has to be personal to you because you got to resonate with it deeply. And one of the reasons for that is just the way that we're built in our brain. We're storytelling beings, and the storytelling is there. Storytelling is there to help bring up the emotion of something, and emotion is Latin for mode of action. And so the alter ego is, and always has been for me, the mode of taking the ideas that people already have out onto the field of play with action. And so when you're connected, like Kobe was to the Black Mamba, or Beyonce when she built out Sasha Fierce, or the inspiration for my book cover, a lot of people think, and friends thought, that the glasses were there to help kind of, symbolize the glasses that I wore, or the fact that I tell the story of, Clark Kent and Superman, when in reality, those are a replica of a pair of glasses that were used by Martin Luther King. People don't realize that Martin Luther King had an alter ego, and he called it his distinguished self. He had perfect vision like I do. And when he wrote his speeches and wrote his stories, he would put on a pair of fake glasses and step into what he called his distinguished self, so that he could write the things he needed to write to inspire an entire group of people for nonviolent action. And he didn't want his own insecurities to get in the way, so he used his distinguished self, when he put on those glasses, to write the things. And so, a good little example of an inspirational story for people that are out there writing. It's a very, very common thing.
Yeah, that's another great example. Like Martin Luther King, he had perfect vision and he uses glasses. And you have Super Richard who also wears glasses. And
Yeah.
interesting, when I started my Instagram page, I actually used my like full name, and like I didn't feel very comfortable. And it was only until I created like Alex in Books and I changed like the name of the website and the Instagram handle,
Mm.
then I felt a lot more comfortable. And like the totem that you mentioned, I have like a specific pen and highlighter that I use, and I
Yeah.
always carry that with me and like a book with me, and that kind of like activates like, hey, this is Alex in Books. It's time to read. It's time to write. And like it's so cool how like you just articulate all these things that have been high performers have been using for for decades. So it's really
Yeah, and I
fascinating.
mean, my favorite piece of feedback that I've gotten from so many people um, over the last while and over the years, because I've been talked about this on stages too, is they come up to me and go like, I feel like I've been doing this before. And I'm like, I know you have because you're a human being and it's very natural for you to do this. And so, if anything, I'm trying to maybe re-inspire people to use their creative imagination more. And to your point, you kind of said it even that you didn't feel comfortable when you were using your full name before. And so really, and maybe some of that was because, and who knows all the reasons why, but only you do really. And even then you might not even be aware of them all, but it's because maybe you were like, you know, concerned about, getting judged by other people, or, everyone else knew you as this person over here. And now all of a sudden you're this person over here, and so forth. And so who was and it probably even created resistance. Maybe you weren't posting as much as you were supposed to, or you committed to, right? And so in that instance, when it comes to the results that you were getting, you were actually being fake. Now, this isn't about, judging you as the person, but you had way more capabilities than you were presenting. So that's incongruency. That's being fake. The moment that you actually created Alex in Books, it allowed you to now bring all of you now out there. That's not you being fake. That's actually being the most real version of you in that instances you can possibly get. And that's the beautiful part. That's the beautiful discovery that people have had when playing with this concept. They're like, oh my goodness, I had this great interview with this one podcast host, and another best-selling author had said, dude, you need to go and read this book. I think you're going to love it. And so he just went and bought the book on Amazon when it got delivered. He kind of looked at the title and he's like, okay, I get it, but I already have a hard enough time being the real version of me all the time. Now I have to create another version of me. He's like, that just sounds exhausting. And that's how he started off his podcast. And he said, so to all of you that are listening, I want to tell you that what I have uncovered is that this has actually allowed me to become the most real version of me, because people use these platitudes like be your real self or be your authentic self and be your true self. And for me as a practitioner, I hear those things and I'm like, hey, those are lovely ideas, you guys, those self-help authors that are out there writing that stuff. But show me the actual nuts and bolts for how you get someone there. Okay. So I get it. That sounds like a rah cheerleader statement. And that's the one problem I have with most of the kind of personal development leadership world is they have all these like platitudes, but they have no meat behind it, whatever. And so people don't argue with them about it because they're like, how are you going to argue with someone who says be your real self? And I say, screw it. Like, you don't even know who your real self yet is if you haven't been out there performing to your most full capabilities. And so that's why the alter ego model, you've already used it as a kid. So why not start using this now to really see what you're made of, to see what you're truly capable of? And the reality of human beings is you are always writing a continuous story. The story of you never ends, which means that all you're doing is you're writing yourself into another real version of yourself. So I just don't get trapped by the idea of authentic self or real self, because man, I'm moving so fast that my real self can't even catch up because I'm constantly evolving into it, right? And that's how human beings work. So that's why I'm saying like words matter, and the words that people have chosen to use when trying to develop other human beings really actually end up trapping people. The idea of authentic self or the real self or whatever are not, they just don't hold a lot of water.
Yeah, that's such a great point you made. Like, people are always evolving, and I heard this great saying is like, if you met yourself a year ago, you want to be embarrassed of who you were, because you want to evolve so much more forward that you don't really recognize yourself. And yeah, you don't want to be the same person that you are right now for the rest of your life. You want to evolve, and you want to get better in life.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if I would couch it in the you'd be embarrassed by yourself, because I think that there's another way thinking about that is like you know, the future version of you, like me, the way that I just think of it, I can't wait to meet the version of me 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. And the reason that I can think that way is because I never stop working on myself. I'm an incomplete project. And so I don't know. Yeah, there's definitely some things where I would definitely go back and maybe shake my shoulders as a 21-year-old and go like, oh my God, like release some of these. But I also had a lot of really good ideas back when I was 21 that I've maybe forgotten about that I need to bring back into life too. So
That's interesting. So, Todd, we're wrapping up here, and so like the last question I always ask my guests are, like your book had a big impact on me. I want to ask you, what are two books that had a big impact on your life, and how did they change you?
yeah, so Seeking Wisdom from Darwin to Munger is a great book. It's I think it's actually out of print, but it's all about models and frameworks and that pursuit of clear and clean thinking was super powerful for me. It spoke my language because I do, as a dyslexic, in the way that I'm dyslexic, I think in pictures and shapes in my own head. So that was a book that had a huge impact on me, and also kind of like also uh, maybe gave me some confidence in that it honored the fact that that's how I've been trying to pursue, like build better models and frameworks in my own mind. So that's been a huge impact. And then maybe a book that you're probably never going to hear before, and I've probably sold a lot of her books for her, but it's called Metaphorically Selling, because I could give you a ton of books like most people could, but Metaphorically Selling. And the reason is because that book helped give me another language for how to say things in a more creative way, in a way that allowed my words to come alive for people, and so that they could take the ideas that I had and, you know, put them into better action or make them more memorable. Because I get asked a lot, because I've won different presentation contests, or I've been ranked as, like, you know, number one speaker at different conferences many times. And I'm not saying that out of ego, it's more out of honoring kind of like where I've gotten a lot of these ideas. I stand on the shoulders of many amazing people. But Metaphorically Selling was one of these great books that, I mean, I've got it dog-eared. I've actually had to reorder it so many times because I've either loaned it out, which I don't do anymore. But it was a great book. And I like giving that one as an example for people, because after you buy my book, come on now, you got to buy my book, then also go buy Metaphorically Selling, because it gives you some really good just linguistic tools to help say things in a better way. But I could go on and on. I mean, I love great books. But I'll also say this one thing too. Beyond books, do not discount the power of using your own humility to become an apprentice or mentee to someone great, and care about yourself enough to make sure that you truly do reach out to the best of the best. When my parents gave me that advice, that became a founding principle of my entire life, and it's been just critical to my own success, because, you know, books are great about opening up new pathways in your mind, but when you get around amazing mentors and amazing people, what do they carry with them? Phenomenal Rolodexes, you know, to age myself, or, you know, phenomenal networks. And so they can open up doors for you so much faster. That's exactly what I did with Harvey Dorfman. He's the one who started funneling a lot more professional clients my way. And he gave me a way better model to be a better mental game coach for people, performance coach. And he showed me, because I got to see and sit in with him when he was working with the best of the best athletes, because he was known as the Yoda of baseball. So, you know, the biggest guy in the world of baseball. So he invited me in so I could sit in on those conversations, and I saw very quickly what their real challenges were, not what I thought their challenges would be, because I was creating content and programming that was going to be attacking problems that weren't even going to be their problems. And so it just took my learning curve from something that was going to be very steep and long, flattened it out, and accelerated me, you know, a decade ahead. So just encourage people to, like, don't hide in books, don't hide behind that, like really get engaged with being, I mean, I love it still. I mean, I still use it to this day, of being an apprentice and being a mentee to someone else. Now, the trick with this stuff is making sure that you're reaching out to people in the right way, because a lot of people, hey, can I pick your brain, as opposed to what can I do for you, which is exactly what I did with Harvey. And don't even put it on me, or don't put it on the other person. Like, come up, like, study them, see what projects they might be working on, just see their own kind of typical path. I knew that Harvey wrote books, so when I reached out to him, I said, hey, I want to come down, I want to clean up your office, I want to take care of all your administration for you, so that I'm sure you got another book inside of you, anything to free you up to do what you are meant to do. And that's really what kind of won him over.
Yeah, that's great advice. Like, if you reach out to your mentor and work with them. Like, I met Ryan Holiday like a year or two ago, and I asked him, like, hey, how do you like decide who to like hire, like, because I'm sure he gets like a ton of people asking him, hey, can I work for you for free?
Yeah.
And he said, don't do that, because it becomes like a homework assignment. Like, you want to come there offering value instead of asking, what can I do for you? Because that kind of puts it on them. Like, you want to come to, you want to offer value, and you want to reach out the right way. So I think that's a great way. I like how we started the podcast by talking about reaching out to your mentors, and we're coming full circle and ending there. So I'm sure.
Yeah, it's been such a big theme of my life, and it's just one of those frustrations that I have nowadays, where people are trying to accelerate towards some sort of perceived level of success before they actually even have the hard sinew and muscle, on their bones. And I think it just creates a pretty hard fall for many people, because now your success, if you do get it, isn't really based on, real muscle. It's kind of based on maybe luck in some ways, or whatever else. But yeah.
And so I'm sure listeners, aside from getting your book, The Alter Ego Effect, of course, where can listeners go to learn more about you, follow you on social media? Where would you direct them?
Yeah, so toddherman.me is my sort of home base on the interwebs, and links to Facebook, and follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm active across all of them, and you can kind of find out about some of the programming that we do, and if you want to learn more about the Alter Ego Effect, you can go to alteregoeffect.com as well.
Awesome. So yeah, for anyone listening, if you want to take your performance to the next level and learn more about the Alter Ego Effect and learn how to activate it, I highly recommend getting the book. And Todd, I just want to say this has been a wonderful conversation, and thank you for coming on the Reader's Journey with us today.
Yeah, you're a champ, man. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Todd.
Bye.
Later. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Reader's Journey. You can learn more about what was covered in today's podcast in the show notes below. If you enjoyed this podcast, the best way you can support it is by subscribing and leaving a positive review. If you're looking for reading tips or book recommendations, head over to alexandbooks.com. If you want to join my reading journey, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter by searching for Alex and Books. That's all for now. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you soon. Read on, everyone.